On May 14, 1863, Union troops entered the capital of Mississippi and did something that forever changed the rules of American warfare. It wasn't just a battle. It was something much worse. And when you understand what really happened in that city and why Grant allowed it to happen, you'll never look at the Civil War the same way again. But here's the shocking part: the attack on Jackson was not a mistake. It was calculated, planned, and it ushered in a new era of total destruction that would culminate in Sherman's infamous March to the Sea. Every great strategy begins with an enemy mistake. April 30, 1863, Grant crosses the Mississippi at Bruinsburg with 23,000 men in the largest amphibious operation in American history until D-Day. His target? Vicksburg, the Gibraltar of the Confederacy. But there's a problem. 50 miles to the east is Jackson, the capital of Mississippi, with 6,000 Confederate soldiers under General John Gregg. Grant has three options. Each seems impossible: march straight to Vicksburg, retreat to Memphis, or divide his forces. Grant chooses a fourth option, one no one expected. May 12, 1863, Grant's vanguard, under General McPherson, encounters Gregg's troops at Raymond. What should have been a minor skirmish turns into a 14-hour battle. But it wasn't the battle that changed everything. It was what Gregg did after. Gregg retreats to Jackson, making McPherson believe he faced a much larger force. McPherson reports to Grant, there is a Confederate army concentrating at Jackson. Grant realizes immediately, if Johnston, one of the South's best generals, is gathering troops in the capital, he could be caught between two Confederate armies. This is when Grant makes the career-defining decision. At 6 p.m. on May 12, he issues orders that shock even his own officers: forget Vicksburg. Turn 90 degrees. We march on Jackson. Tomorrow. May 7th, Grant had 45,000 men marching. But on the night of May 13th, something happens that should have stopped the attack completely. A storm. A deluge. Roads that had choked soldiers with dust for weeks turned into knee-deep mud trenches. But here's the detail that took historians decades to realize: the rain didn't slow Grant down. It sped up his plan. Because while his troops advanced through the mud, Johnston arrived in Jackson on the same train bringing reinforcements. Johnston checks into the Bowman house, meets with Gregg, and asks a simple question: how many men do we have? The answer: 6,000. Johnston looks at the map and sends a telegram to Richmond that sums up everything in 3 words: I am too late. But Johnston didn't know something crucial. One of the 3 messengers he sent to Pemberton in Vicksburg was a Union spy. Grant read Johnston's orders before Pemberton even received them. And that's when Grant realized he could do something no general had dared until then: destroy a Confederate state capital as a lesson. Morning of May 14, 1863. 2 Union columns, McPherson with 12,000 men, Sherman with 16,000, converge on Jackson in a torrential rain. 10 a.m., skirmishes begin. Gregg positions 900 men at the Opie Wright farm. 11 a.m., the rain stops. The Yankees advance. What happens next is brutal and fast. But in the meantime, Sherman discovered something that completely changed Grant's plan. While advancing from the southwest, Sherman found another Confederate force. 1,000 men. Gregg didn't know he was surrounded. Sherman sends his superior artillery forward. A 20-minute bombardment forces the Confederates to retreat, leaving the bridge intact. 2 p.m., Johnston receives the news he feared. His left flank has been turned. Johnston orders an immediate retreat north, away from Pemberton. But here's what history books rarely mention: Johnston could have had 11,000 men by the end of the day. He retreated too early. And he condemned both Jackson and Vicksburg. Shortly after 2 p.m., Union troops entered Jackson in the rain. Grant, who had been traveling with Sherman's corps, stays in the same room at the Bowman house where Johnston slept the night before. And then Grant does something surprising: he orders a celebration. But while the officers celebrated, something sinister began in the streets. Sherman appoints General Joseph Moore military governor with clear orders: destroy everything that can benefit the war effort. Then someone discovers something that turns order into chaos: a large stock of rum. What happened over the next 36 hours is documented in dozens of diaries: drunken soldiers plundering civilian homes, the 31st Iowa Regiment occupying the state capitol and holding a mock legislature, government buildings destroyed, including the Institute for the Blind and the Insane Asylum, Jackson civilians joining the destruction, looting stores, And then, on the morning of May 15th, Grant gives the order that would change the war. Sherman, stay in Jackson until you have destroyed this place as a railroad center and manufacturing town of military supplies. Sherman complies. Most effectively done, Grant would later report. What Sherman did in Jackson on May 15th and 16th ushered in a new doctrine of warfare: telegraph lines cut, rails heated and twisted into spirals, later called Sherman's neckties. Arsenal burned, foundries set ablaze. Sherman set so many buildings on fire that the city earned a nickname it carries to this day, Chimneyville, because the fire spared little but the brick chimneys, which stood like tombstones after the conflagration. But here's what no one expected: this was only the first burning. Jackson would burn 2 more times during the war. 3 times in total. May 16th, 10 a.m., Sherman finally leaves Jackson. He turns west, toward Vicksburg. What Grant did worked. May 16th, crushing victory at Champion Hill. May 17th, victory at Big Black River. May 18th, siege of Vicksburg begins. July 4th, Pemberton surrenders. Jackson battle casualties: Union, 300 total. Confederates, 500 estimated casualties. But the true casualties were civilian. Numbers never fully accounted for. For decades, historians debated, did Grant deliberately order the destruction of civilian property? The answer came in Grant's own writings. He wrote in his memoirs that Sherman did the work most effectively. There was no remorse. And here's what changed everything about how American wars would be fought: Sherman would take the lessons from Jackson and scale them up massively. 18 months later, the March to the Sea. It all started in Jackson, in an attack that lasted 4 hours but left scars for generations. So here's what we know: Grant turned 45,000 men 90 degrees in 24 hours. Captured a state capital in less than a day. Systematically destroyed civilian infrastructure. Ushered in the doctrine of total war. Won 5 battles in 18 days. Forced Vicksburg's surrender in 47 days. The question is, was Grant a military genius doing what was necessary to end the war? Or did he cross a line that should never have been crossed? If you want answers, I need to know. Leave a comment telling me, should I investigate the unreported civilian casualties? Or should I show how Sherman used Jackson as a prototype to devastate all of Georgia? Because this story is not over. It's just beginning. Subscribe if you want to know what happened next.